This is Abnormal Entertainment.
I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life.
You're listening to the No Cry Zone, a progressive political podcast on the Abnormal Entertainment Network.
And welcome to the No Cry Zone, here with John and Rob and me, and that's about it. We'll see you later.
We have a studio audience today.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't notice.
Yeah.
It's a full house in here.
It's a barn.
It's a full barn, sorry.
The barn. Who are we with, John?
We're with Mona Shand, who's running for the 42nd State House as a Democrat, and in Michigan.
Do you have something in your throat, John?
Right.
Progressivism.
It's been stuck there for a number of decades. And you, Mona, have brought along a couple of your campaign volunteers.
I did. I brought Danielle Anderson, who is my field organizer, and she is with the Sierra Club and has been a tremendous help to me this summer. And I also brought along my good friend Nathan, who is going into 8th grade and knows more about politics than all of us combined.
Yeah.
So can we call them Nate 8 and Danderson?
If you want. You could, but they might not answer.
In my mind, that's their names now.
So Mona, we wanted to talk with you. You a couple weeks ago held a campaign rollout event where you debuted your first digital ad. And
right.
We're in a fairly conservative county, a fairly conservative district that you're running in, and but your ad, I think, was interesting in that it made a point of pride in talking about being a child of immigrants.
Absolutely, and that is the thing in my life that I am the most proud of. My parents came here from Egypt in the late 60s. And they came here because their opportunities were very limited there. We're from the very small Christian minority. They've been persecuted for hundreds, if not thousands of years there. And my parents knew that in order to make a better life for themselves, they'd have to leave their country. And they came here, and Michigan welcomed them and gave them so much opportunity. And I feel like I have a tremendous sense of responsibility to fight to make sure that opportunity doesn't slip away, because that's what I think is happening in our state.
And so the thing that I think is interesting is that, you've been described as someone that has probably the best chance of any Democrat in a while to win office, from a Livingston County seat.
Yeah, no pressure there.
And so from that perspective, I mean, and again, as we said, pretty conservative district. How has the reception been when you are talking to people or telling them that story?
I would say it's been overall overwhelmingly positive. And I think Danielle and Nathan, who are out knocking doors with me every single day, will agree that, by far and wide, we have good people who live in this area. And they want the same things that I want, that we all want. We believe in education. We believe in clean water. We believe in opportunities. We may disagree about the way to achieve that, but we've been welcomed by far at people's doors. We've had good conversations. The scariest things that have happened have been the dogs that we've come across, not the people.
That's funny.
It's very true.
So Danielle, why don't you tell us what your position is with the campaign?
So I am a field director. I'm responsible for making sure that we're contacting voters, we're knocking on their doors and calling them on the phone, just making sure that we get the word out about Mona and get her in this seat.
So how did you come to the campaign?
So I am an intern with Sierra Club. I got that chance to work with that organization through the University of Michigan, where I am a student, and since they have endorsed Mona, they put me on the campaign and were like, well, why don't you work with her, And as soon as I met her, I knew that was someone I wanted to work with, just because she has a platform so close to my own values, especially in terms of working across the aisle and being willing to be transparent and really make government work more for the people. And as soon as we met, we just hit it off instantly, and I knew that this is someone that I really want to work for.
And Nathan, you're going into 8th grade, is that right?
Yes.
And so, how did you come to the campaign?
Well, after 2016, I was very disturbed because...
Why?
What happened?
I don't
Did
understand.
something happen in 2016?
Damn World Cup.
Soccer.
Once again, soccer ruining the world.
And so, I realized that I couldn't, I saw it, I mean, in middle school, how it was affecting the people around me because people thought that it was okay to act like Donald Trump in terms of, like, bullying people who are racial minorities or, like, women, like raiding girls and, like, really, those, like, disgusting behaviors. And I realized that, if I wanted a change in the government, I needed to, like, step up and try to do something. And so,
And you were how old?
I was just going to say,
You were
weren't you 11 in 2016?
So let's just real quickly, at 11 years old, how politically active were you, David?
I was Indiana Jones president, apparently at 11 years old.
Right. Rob?
11, no, playing baseball.
Right.
I mean, nothing. I don't think I even would watch the news. The news came on, that was time for all of us kids to split.
Right, that's what my parents did. They watched the news.
Right.
Right. Yeah, you sort of get it from them. So Mona, I guess, you know, obviously, you know, each week on this show, we've tried not to make it a what the hell did he do this week?
It's hard though.
But it has. There's almost no way around it, and so because each week, and frankly, we feel like we need to be a daily podcast if you really wanted to keep up.
Right.
I mean, weekly. You know, we always do the podcast usually on a Wednesday, and it seems like everything happens on Thursday. We're like,
Well, what we
dang it.
switch it to, we do a Thursday, you know,
Yeah.
it's a news dump Friday.
That's right. You're going to have to expand the length of the show if you're going to change that day, though.
Right. So from your perspective, not only as a candidate, but just as a mom, as a professional, and we should point out you've been a teacher, you've been a journalist. You know, how is this environment? How are you perceiving this? And what, you know, looking forward, what are your thoughts, fears?
I have so many.
Yeah.
No, I really do. I keep telling myself at some point we're going to reach that tipping point where people are going to say, okay, this is enough. But we keep passing what we all think should be that acceptable threshold. It's like if ripping children away from their parents wasn't your threshold, what will it be? Like actual murder? I don't know, but I guess I am. The experience of talking to people on their doorsteps has been heartening in a way, because I do find that even here in this kind of bastion of conservatism, what we've been told is such a conservative county, people are frustrated. They're frustrated that basic things aren't getting done. And I think that there are a lot of people who are ready to put politics aside and, to quote someone who may or may not be running for governor, fix the damn roads, you know, fund our schools. The water situation right now, you know, we've got PFAS in our waters, or PFAS, or however you say it. I don't want it in my body. That's all I know. And a lot of people here, it's really concerning them, and it should be. So I do feel like we're going to reach that tipping point eventually. I'm just praying it's between now and November, right? Because I really feel like I could get things done.
And yeah, so I guess talk about if going to Lansing. You know, what would your agenda be? How would every candidate says, "I'm going to get things done.
Right.
I want to get things done." Every candidate says that. So, and some do, and some don't. So what's your plan to do that, to try and fulfill that?
So, you know, for me, everything comes down to education. Everything starts with education. Whether we're talking about our economy, healthcare, the environment, so much of it is rooted in making sure we have an educated and informed workforce and citizenry. So I think so many of us agree that the way we fund our schools is not working. We know for a fact that it takes more money to educate English language learners, kids who come from low-income backgrounds, special needs kids. But that's not the way Proposal A sets things up. So I think we need to really seriously rethink and rework the way we fund our schools. We need to stop the attacks on our public school teachers, stop the bleeding in our public education system. And I think when we do that, it's going to help fix a lot of the problems that we have. I mean, I tell people, yes, we've got potholes in our roads. Yes, we absolutely need to address our infrastructure. But I look at what we're developing with our human infrastructure. And I think the potholes that are forming there as a result of not funding our schools, those down the road are going to be far more costly and devastating to repair. I mean, my kids are not going to just be competing with kids from Brighton and Howell and Pinckney for jobs. They're going to be competing on a global marketplace, and they need to be prepared. And I don't feel like we're doing that right now. So absolutely addressing our education crisis is number one. I think protecting our resources as well. I mean, we were gifted with 20% of the world's fresh water, and now we're giving it away to corporations, and we're poisoning people with it. And that's got to stop. It really does. We're not going to be the Great Lakes state for much longer if we don't keep this up. And there are so many jobs tied to our environment. So it is an economic issue at its root.
Rob, you seem to be percolating some questions there, some thoughts?
I am. You speak of those things that I call kitchen table issues, that you go around the county and hear the kitchen table issues. But really, when you tell them you're a Democrat, what happens?
Yeah, that's a difficult conversation to have. It is. And I don't lead with that, for sure. And I don't even have it printed on my material. And so I try to get people to see, like, okay, I just had this conversation with a man today. He was talking about how he's upset that Nestle's taking our water. He's upset that our teachers aren't paid enough and that there are problems with the schools. And then he told me that he always votes Republican. And so I asked him, do you feel like things have gotten any better on those? You know, you've had 8 years of a Republican governor, Republican state house, and a Republican state senate. Are things any better on those two issues? And he said, no. I said, so, you know, maybe it's time to kind of rethink the way you vote and look at these issues. We agree on these issues. And if we agree on those, I bet there's a lot more that we agree on. The thing is, that's a very long conversation to have with somebody. And
it's a hell of a bumper sticker.
It is. And, you know, so my main concern is, can we reach enough people in time?
Right.
One-on-one, you can have those conversations.
And I guess that was going to be my next question is, what is your elevator pitch to that person when they hit you upside the head with exactly that? Time and time again, there has to be something that our Democratic candidates here in this area have to shock people awake with. And I would hope that you could do that as a practice with your gang here. Like that's what we have to practice on day in, day out.
Right.
That, you know, when we get hit with this question, what is our elevator pitch back to them? I liked yours already, but I do think that wasn't a game changer for that person. He's not going to go, oh, well, I'm just going to give up on my Republican Party forever.
Right.
I'm going to continue to vote Republican and maybe get a better Republican next time, which is, I think, a lot of Republicans are doing with Donald Trump right now. I hope we'll keep the Republicans in there, but maybe we'll get a better Republican, a better conservative than Donald Trump we were so unhappy with at this point. So I think this is our time.
Yes.
You know, this is the time. We have this energy. All right, my next question is, I went to a meeting with the local Democrats at one point, and the largest question there to get started as a candidate was, how do I get my funding? So how did you get your funding?
Well,
and how much funding did you need to actually get in this game?
So that's a great question, and one of the reasons I think I am the right candidate for this is that I have a very wide circle of friends and family and people who believe in me, both inside and outside the district. Typically, the person who has run for this seat has not been able to tap into much money. And let's face it, we all want to get the money out of politics, But right now, you need to have money to run for office. It's just a fact. So I've been able to raise to date a little more than $30,000. My goal is still to raise about $50,000, and I think I'm on track to do that. But when I announced, from the time that I announced, people have been very generous about donating to my campaign, and I have been very aggressive about targeting the people that I know and asking them for money. At first, I was really reluctant to do that. I was like, oh, I can't ask you for money. I can't do that. And someone who is a state rep right now, Christy Pagan, she and I sat down together and she just kind of laid it out. She said, look, you are not asking them for money to buy shoes. You are asking them for democracy. And most people will agree that is something worth paying for, that they are willing to put their money behind. And so I have that in the back of my mind. Every time I make a phone call, I write a letter, I send an email, I do all of those things. I'm willing, I go to people's houses. Actually, tonight, Nathan's parents are hosting a little event for me. And I will talk to, any group of people. If you've got a book club, a garden club, a bike club, a neighborhood walking club, I will come and talk to them. And yes, I will ask them for money because it's the only way to run a campaign.
Okay. So as a percentage of the money that you've raised, how much is private individuals donating money versus, say, PAC money?
So I've raised, I've received a lot of endorsements from different groups and different PACs, but of those, only 2 of them came with donations. So I've raised $2,500 in PAC donations, and the rest of it is all individual donations, most averaging about $100.
So that's stellar. I mean, the vast majority of your money is coming from individual contributions.
And I put in some of my own money, but I'll be honest, my husband and I, we have 3 kids. We don't have buckets of money lying around the house to donate to this campaign. We have put in what we can, and we are fully invested in it as far as our time and our energy. But we don't have endless bank accounts that we can put our own money in. So we're very thankful to those who have donated, and I'm really committed to using every dollar wisely.
But it has been largely grassroots, and I think one thing that's important to consider is we're not taking corporate money, we're not taking special interest group money, no NRA. We don't have anyone that once we get to Lansing we're going to expect that are going to expect favors from Mona, because she really is. She's only taking from people. It is largely grassroots.
In the opposition party, do you know what kind of funding they're looking at and where that comes from?
So the last I saw from the last close of books, my opponent had donated about $26,000 of her own money to her campaign, and that's what she had in her cash on hand, was about $26,000. The vast majority of the rest of the money that she had in her account was from PACs. She had a few $1,000s from grassroots local folks, but there's a very big difference in how we are funded.
And can you sort of characterize the PACs that are donating?
They were all very conservative PACs, the Freedom Fund, all right-wing, Right to Life, a lot of those groups. So that says a lot as well.
Now you started your campaign. I mean, when would you say you really began campaigning?
We had our official kickoff event in April.
Okay.
And we held an event at Brewery Becker. We had more than 100 people, great atmosphere. And I would say as far as hitting the doors, we started that in May.
Your opponent, as far as I can tell, has not begun her campaign yet. We're heading into September. Am I wrong on that?
From the looks of it, that's what I see as well. Now, I will say she had enormous signs out before the primary, and I think that's where a lot of her money went, is into those signs, which I found interesting because neither one of us had an opponent in the primary. So there were a lot of big signs out, but again, they were the giant signs in public areas. And I'm out in neighborhoods every day, and I saw very few individual yard signs in families' homes. And I have people asking me every day, when are those signs, we want one of your yard signs, when are they coming? I've held off a little bit because, again, I had no opponent in the primary, and I don't feel like people want to see these signs for 5 months. So they're coming, and they will be out in neighborhoods, and I think you're going to see a lot of them.
So we talk on this show a lot about messaging and how Democrats largely don't have a coherent message, an across-the-board thing. Is there something that we're not seeing, or as you're running, are you seeing other Democrats from other areas saying the same things you are? And why can't we get that on a more unified basis?
No, you're right, and I think that, people talk a lot about the Democratic Party having kind of a struggle for its own soul right now, and I do see that in Michigan. I see some people running super progressive campaigns, and other people, maybe more like me, running much more moderate campaigns. And it's almost like we're, if you look at our platforms, you wouldn't be completely convinced we're from the same party. So I think that is a messaging problem that the Democratic Party is having right now. That I don't see as much on the Republican side. I feel like if you pick up 2 Republican campaigns, they're going to be pretty similar.
Right. So what do we do, in your opinion?
Question. It's a good question. I think that, again, most Democrats want to get to that same place, and we want to move the needle. It's just that question of can you move it all at once, or does it need to go in kind of gradual ticks? Abdul El-Sayed was a great example of a candidate who wanted to move that needle all at once. And I think as a result of his very progressive campaign, it inched over. And the rest of us can kind of benefit from that. But I do think we have to come together and we have to agree, like, this is what we want. This is what's doable right now. We can't eat the elephant all at once.
So we saw some national primaries end yesterday. And I was going to get your take on a couple of notions. First, the gubernatorial in Florida. We have the GOP primary put through a Trump-loving person who had his 2-year-old build a wall with blocks in a commercial.
Oh my.
And the Democrats are running an incredibly progressive, the former mayor of Tallahassee.
Who I'd never even heard his name until last night.
And I don't remember.
And I'm going to be honest.
Gillum.
Andrew Gillum, I
it's
think?
Nathan here who told me all about his campaign. So Nathan is the expert on this topic.
So you're the expert. We're going to go to you two. We've got these 2 diametric oppositions here, and no centrist candidates from either party. What does that spell for Florida, Michigan, and Mona, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think that it'll be really interesting. I think that we'll get, it'll be like a preview of 2020, the presidential election maybe, because there's a lot of really progressive people that seem to be contenders, future contenders, and them against Trump. And I feel like, I mean, Florida is a swing state, and this will kind of show how they feel about that. And
do you feel like Andrew Gillum has a chance?
Definitely, yes. Yeah, I do.
Let me ask you this, Nathan, for your own self. Would you prefer to see more very progressive candidates like Andrew Gillum, just nationally, just generally speaking? Is that a direction that that you think really the nation should be going, or more to the moderate end? I mean, in terms of, and let me put it this, in terms of actually winning. Because we can all wave our magic wand who I want, but who do you think, how do you think that's, do you think that the far progressive, because there's been arguments made on both sides, that, actually that if the Democrats went more of a progressive stance, it would actually end up winning more. But they're afraid of that, and so they stay more to the center, and then they become indistinguishable from other Republicans, which I don't think is necessarily true, but nonetheless.
I mean, I feel like progressives are more inspiring. They have more passionate people on their side, but I also feel like they can kind of scare away like independents and like leaning Republicans votes, because they want a lot of times like single payer healthcare and tuition free college and things like that, and they think that a lot of people think that we can't have that in America.
What do you think? Can we?
Yes. I feel like, the UK has it, Canada has it, so many other developed countries have universal health care, and I really don't think that health care should be a privilege. It should be a right that I feel like the government should guarantee to every citizen, and I don't feel like people should be so afraid of the government. They can do the government can do great things if they have the right people elected, like Mona. So,
Good segue.
There you go.
Okay, so we're a lot of big issues that we're facing here, and a lot of what you guys are talking about is a concentrated misinformation campaign over a number of years. So we're in a pretty blue area. How do you guys combat that misinformation when you run into it?
Red.
Red, yeah, red.
I got excited for a second. Like, blue area?
I was thinking blue is in suffocation.
This room is a blue area.
You're right.
Just in here, though.
Literally this table.
Just this room. So that was
Judy, we're talking about you too.
Okay, so red. How do you combat that? So you have the conversations individually, but those take a very long time.
They do.
What do you do when you're trying to get the message across quickly to get rid of that misinformation?
That is a tall order, and I don't think that you actually can get rid of that quickly. People are so indoctrinated and they're so entrenched, and trying to undo that can't be done with a digital ad, with a Facebook post, with anything that's quick and easy. Right. Unfortunately, those quick and easy things can further doctrinate them when they see them on their side, but we can't undo that. So it's going to take time, and it's going to take work. And again, I just hope we have the time to get enough of it done. And I think that when I am elected, not if, they will see, they will come around. I've got to keep believing that I think we have the potential to change people's lives for the better. And, I'm still waiting for that person to tell me that their life is so much better than it was 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. I haven't found that person.
Right. We hear them online.
Oh, yeah.
So my last question, which probably isn't my last question, but it's the one I'm thinking of right now. How do you guys feel being on a podcast hosted by three middle-aged white guys who are essentially the enemy? Oh, we're all straight, by the way.
No,
yeah.
I would hesitate strongly to say that you're all the enemy. I think that I think that there's a large segment of democratic thinkers who are very radical and that are very pro what am I trying to say, political correctness, I'm sorry, and they almost get to the point where they want to police speech. But I think that the solution to that, and also to return to your other question, is we have to be able to have these open conversations and to talk to people with different views than us. And sometimes when we go to the doors, there are people, I had a guy the other day, he was willing to hear me out about what I had to say about Mona, but he said, if she doesn't support the wall, she's un-American. So some people are very, they're very set in their ways, and I think Democrats can get like that too, and I don't think it's healthy. Mm-hmm. I think that when we make people afraid of speaking their minds and saying how they actually feel, whether it be about a certain race or even how they feel about women, if we restrict any aspect of speech, I don't think that's efficient. I don't think that's going to be productive.
Yeah, it's interesting being an intern through the Sierra Club. Mm-hmm. I wonder if the last 4 years necessarily, if environmental issues can become a wedge issue. In terms of what happened in Flint, and now with the PFOS, I don't know what to call it either. The perfluoroalkyl,
poison.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for correcting me.
That's what we were looking for. Poison.
Because now, here we are in Livingston County. The state is now conducting a review of all public water systems to look for these perfluoroalkyl substances. And
I love that you can say that.
I can.
But
I know.
PFAS.
Yeah, PFAS.
PFAS was a rapper from the 90s.
And so it's interesting because just neighbors and others, suddenly they're very attuned to. Wait, my water is affected. Wait.
What do we always say though?
Yeah.
It doesn't. Nothing affects a conservative until it affects them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So true. And I will say that one thing our organization has been focusing on in terms of Sierra Club is the fact that there is a racial component in all of this. And I think that in Flint, Michigan, when the water was being poisoned, because that is the truth, that's what it is. And I will say that there is evidence that Snyder and his administration knew what was happening and did nothing. I think that was a lot easier for people to ignore. But when it becomes a question of me and my family, I think people are a little more willing to pay attention. At the same time, I sit with my colleagues, every day and try to understand how can you not want to shut down a pipeline that is 6 years old and quickly deteriorating. How do you not want to have more trees on this earth and an ocean that isn't full of plastic? And I think it's hard to understand. And I think some people, it's not the first thing in their minds, but it would be nice if people could give a little more consideration to that.
So there's a question: how do we not get trapped in our bubbles? I mean,
Right.
we live in a conservative area, so we're kind of beset on all sides by conservatism. So generally what I would do, and what my wife and I guess we've talked about this before, is wrap ourselves up in our little bubbles and only go for and look for the news we want to see.
Right.
So how do we get out of that? I know you guys are talking to people every day and having to be cordial. So give some advice to some people that aren't doing that.
I think that it's important to look at all sources of news. I like to read Washington Post. I like to read Fox News. Obviously, sometimes they say things that I don't quite agree with, but it's important to know what the other side's saying. It's important to talk to.
Once a week or something.
Only
in order
days
to
that end
at
with
least
Y.
create a debate point for that argument.
But you
of
know
yours,
what? Sometimes they aren't completely crazy.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
It's just a different point of view. Perspective is everything.
And I think that another thing that's really important is just to meet people where they're at and say, if you think that the wall is a big issue, why? Why do you think that immigration is as big of a deal as it is? Well, I'm, on the other side thinking, you're welcome in my country. I really want to understand why and what it is. And I think that's the biggest thing, is questioning everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right, and to take your own personal wall down before you talk to that
Right.
person. Because we go into every conversation these days. It feels like we're ready. We've got the rebuttal building in our head while that person is still talking. Mm-hmm. So we don't really hear them. We hear the answer that we're already about to give. Mm-hmm. So I've had to learn to do that in talking to people. Just let them talk and actually listen. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to be heard and to feel like they're heard. And I've had a lot of people thank me for just listening to them. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the key, is that people want to know that somebody's listening.
Right. And that might be the whole way to flip the switch that we need.
It might be.
Is just to sit and listen to them. I mean, how many psychic lines around the world today are just got old ladies talking to, paying $5 a minute for just someone to talk to.
Miss Vitra would be a good line.
I do have a question, though, that I kind of dabble in some Republican fields and circles and some 2A circles, just to kind of see the same thing.
Crop circles.
The Clinton file circles, the aliens. No, I'm just kidding. They probably won't back me up on that. But anyway, now that you've seen us, and I'm sure you'll go back and visit all 146 episodes that we have. In that you'll hear me say Citizens United was the big turning point. So I hear that even in those circles that they think it's the Democrats and it's not their party, and vice versa, but they are still saying the same thing, that it's they are not being heard because of money in politics. So I have made it a point whenever I can to talk to any candidate and say, are you against money in politics in this form? Do you think it has perverted the system? How many people do you think you can get on your side? And can you create a coalition to change the laws for the people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's perverted politics. This unlimited dark money that can come into, Michigan is particularly perverse on this topic. And it's got to change. And the House Democrats have a plan to change it. They just need, a willing legislature to get it through.
And a governor to sign it.
Exactly. And I think that could be a game changer again for us, to get that money out of there, to be more transparent, we were talking a little while ago about, people need to be able to know who's funding candidates. And right now, it's really difficult to access that information. That shouldn't be the case. We should be able to see that plain front and center.
Well, you see, Elizabeth Warren is bringing out a anti-corruption bill right now, and it's probably going to be shot down. My thing is she's getting press with it.
Right.
She's getting that out there. That is now in the sphere of politics. That here's a Democrat that is going after this anti-corruption bill. We don't want lobbyists. We want to limit the access to the government after you're out of government. Things of that nature. Are there enough Democrats going out there and proposing things of this nature in order to gain even Republican support in the House? I think with a moderate enough step, each time we have an election cycle, we can make another small step and another small step. And it won't happen overnight. But with those small steps, you can now get the votes of some of the moderate Republicans in the House. And they can go back to their constituents and be pleased. Their constituents will be pleased on that. And I think that is a big rallying cry for me that I always try and go back to. If they start going off onto their tangents, I always say, well, the real cause of this is because, the Supreme Court of the United States is a political sphere of, Congress now,
Right.
and the Senate and the President. So how do we stop that? And that is a big rallying cry. And I think in this district especially, we need to be coming up with things that are interesting to the other side as well, not just to Democrats.
So
because there aren't very many of us here.
Right. So, and Mona, I know you've got to go and get back to campaigning. So
Yes.
we'll make this. We'll leave you with the final word.
Sure.
So taking what Rob is saying, then, and when you are elected,
Yes,
and
thank you.
are in Lansing,
Yes.
there's. I don't think anyone's anticipating that there's going to be some huge blue wave and you're going to have some super majority of Democrats. You're going to have to work across the aisle.
Right.
How do you do that? How are you going to plan to work with Republican legislators that ideologically are not where you are?
I think, as Rob was saying, it comes down to finding those pockets of agreement and in not treating everything at the extremes. Like, meet me in the middle. That's what I tell people at the doors, and that's what I will say in Lansing. Like, that's where change is going to happen. That's where it's going to start to happen. And I think we can spread out from there. But come to the middle. Let's stop treating everything like a political football game and just tossing the ball from one side of the field to the other, which I know that image may not apply around here because we've got the Lions and
It's usually down at that one end.
Right. But in general, from what I understand, that's how football works. Like, back and forth from one side to the other. So that's not the way we're supposed to be, with politics. And that's why I'm trying to stay close to the middle. And I think that when we come to that place, we really do have more in common than we do apart.
That separates us.
All right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mona Shan, thank you so much for joining us. Danielle, Nathan, thank you.
Thank you for having
Good
us.
luck.
Thank you.
And we're back.
Sorry, yawned.
Well, back to the boring.
So I was pissed. I thought you were bringing Moana over.
Oh, jeez.
That would've
He
been-
would have sung the
That'd been
song.
great. Mona's
And-
fine, but
and you-
Moana.
Yeah. I'd rather have Mona.
Yeah, she was
I'd
really
rather
good.
have Mona singing
You know.
Moana.
Okay.
Next time. Note next time.
Okay. So, very interesting to hear from Mona, obviously, but I think, her campaign volunteers.
Young people.
Yeah. The youth. The Utes.
The mutes.
The Mutes had some interesting things to say.
Amazing. 8th grade. Look
Yeah.
at what
Oh
look
my
at
God.
what this planet has done to our children. They used to go out and play. Now they have to be politically
So,
active.
is this
because there's a tyrant
the
in
positive effect of Donald Trump? That kids that are 11 at the time and 13 now feel like, well, fuck, I gotta get in on this shit now.
Well, see,
We're swearing now. The kids are
the kids are gone.
I think Rob alluded to the fact that it was a bad thing. But maybe the bad thing was that we weren't like that, and look what happened.
Yeah, good point, David. Good point.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think even like my niece who's 13,
Right.
she's not as active as Nate 8, but she's aware. She's well aware of what's going on and keeps track of what's going on.
And even if she doesn't know who the Democratic candidate for governor in Florida is, your niece knows right from wrong.
Yeah.
Good from bad.
Well,
evil.
What helps
from not
more
evil.
people than less people. I mean, good and bad is arbitrary.
Right.
Right and wrong is even sadly arbitrary. But she understands what helps the most people.
Right.
What is probably the better policy for more people. And of course, you're going to lean, liberal and progressive and democratic that way. And to her, and I'm sure to Nate, money isn't the biggest deal to them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny
And we have
because...
plenty.
Yeah.
At all times. We
It's
lost $21 trillion in 10 years.
Right.
We have plenty of money.
Is that all? I'm sure we lost more.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all we know about.
Yeah, right.
That's just one department.
Yeah, right. Sometimes I feel like, especially when you talk to the youths, you feel like, can we just pass the baton now?
Yeah. So look at those Parkland kids.
Yeah,
They were
right.
truly inspiring. They're going to start running for office pretty soon. They can all vote.
Yeah.
That's got people terrible. It's got the right terrified.
Right.
That all these kids are coming up, with the liberal agenda in the schools. And, that's another, way of dog whistling, get rid of these crappy teachers and privatize schools to get your agenda down,
Right.
Saying that. But, we all know that it's basic common sense. When kids are growing up and they're playing with each other, regardless of race, creed, color, they're making friends. They walk up to strangers and make friends. That's a pretty progressive agenda as a child. Mm-hmm.
It really is.
And it takes a lot of coercion and fear to turn them from that. And maybe that's the tipping point, that we're all looking for this big tipping point that's going to get Trump impeached or shit. But it's really the youth of America is horrified at what we've become.
As well they should.
Yeah.
Well, and it goes to, I don't want to go back to the thing, but it was a book about the Nazi takeover from 33 to 43, and the gentleman said it was never anything ground shaking. It was just a little bit worse each time.
Right.
This time it was this, and it didn't scare anybody. And so they did a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And I think what the kids now are seeing is, boy, this is shitty. I don't have a job. They're calling me a loser. I am not a loser. I'm going to go say fuck off.
I'm reading right now Philip Roth's The Plot Against America, in which he posits an alternative history of the United States if, instead of in 1940 FDR being reelected, if Charles Lindbergh was elected president in 1940.
Yeah, he was.
And
he was Trump.
Yeah, and in a certain way, obviously, not personally speaking, but by policy almost, he would be, yeah. And it's just interesting reading that, because you're talking about the degrees by which things change, and because you're right, there's rarely a seismic, occurrence where the whole society changes like overnight. I mean, it usually does occur in degrees, and so while that can happen in a negative way, it can happen in a positive way too, and that probably more likely that's the way positive things do happen.
And sea change
Is that there will be incrementally moving, so that the sea change is the election of Donald Trump and the rise of this white nationalism to power. It's always been there. Anyone who knows anything about American history knows American history is a history of white nationalism, but its rise to power, back to power. Let's put it this way. I mean, white nationalism lost its perch in power about 100 years ago, and it's now returned to the seat of power. And will it be temporary, or will it be more permanent than that?
I'm betting temporary.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Well, I don't think we need to hope so much as in. I mean, even if a bunch of Republicans are voted in and there's no blue wave, or what happens in the upcoming elections, still a majority of the nation not on that track. That's just the fact. It's just a fact. It's 52% of the nation does not believe in that, and the 48% that does is largely older.
Right.
So, I'm betting on, Nate and my niece and your kids to come in and just, put us in a home, point us towards something, and go fix the world.
Right. Because we have it coming.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean,
I mean, even through, just not personally that it's our fault, but, we allowed this to happen. We were playing at 11. We didn't care. Mm-hmm. Because everything was great. We bought into that whole American dream at that point.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's an interesting point that you make in terms of our generation was handed off, inherited, if you will, a lot of these shibboleths, a lot of these false narratives about the American dream and home ownership and, go to school, get a high school diploma, and go get a job, and you're fine.
Work for 30 years.
Work for 30 years.
Put kids through college.
Exactly, that whole notion, and we're learning personally day by day, and our kids are seeing it as they're beginning to develop themselves. That none of that's true.
Yeah, well, we're the first generation that got screwed in the American dream.
Right.
And
my father-in-law, so he's a generation before me. He actually was Chrysler, and that was kind of the first time I had ever heard of pensions being taken away and healthcare being taken away.
Well, it happened to them.
And
it happened to them.
holy
but
cow,
they had a shot at it, though.
Yeah.
He could have bought a house and put some kids through school.
And
stuff, long before then. I can't retire. I'm never going to be able to retire.
Right. I don't see how.
And there's statistics out there that say that even the people who are working into their 70s still don't have any savings.
Right.
And
so what we're faced with, we're the first generation to actually physically embody this from birth to death. This lack of an American dream, and we largely gave in and gave up.
Right. One of the one of the most depressing things I've seen and began to open my eyes to it was about 6 years ago. We went to Disney World. Took our family, went to Disney World, and I remember we're in the Disney cafeterias or whatever. You had the meal plan, or you can you just go and get your food. Right. And I know. Sorry, didn't mean to tempt you. But I will say it was as much bacon as you could eat, and, shrimp scampi.
And you lived?
I know.
You survived?
My wife was with me. Whatever.
Boss killed.
But I noticed the amount of elderly people, like seniors, like not just like 70 plus seniors, 75, who were doling out the mashed potatoes or whatever. Right. And at first, we were there for like a week or so, and the first couple days it was just like, oh. And then
maybe they're bored.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. And then he really does done, and you're like, no, they're here because they fucking have to be here.
To eat.
They have to be here. Yep. And who the hell wants to do this when you're 75? No. Nobody.
And be taken advantage of. Because that once you get a job, you really can't go get another one anywhere else. You're so thankful that somebody gave you a job at the age of 70, no matter what it is, that you will be that model employee, no matter what the policies are.
No matter how much pain you're in.
No matter how much pain.
And that was kind of, I think, where it opened my eyes, because, obviously Florida is so retiree, dense.
Among other denses.
Right. But that's where you kind of go, huh. It's an interesting thing.
Arizona was like that,
and
too.
You see it here in Michigan now too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the classic joke, obviously the Walmart greeter, but
it's Walmart cashier. It's
it's
our local Tim Hortons has a lot of senior citizens.
Right, and so the notion that's another one of those false narratives of people that are working into their 70s. They do it because I want to keep active. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are, but I think there's.
Or I think I'd rather play golf.
Keeping active means eating.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I want to stay active. Eat. Pay for my mortgage.
Have a roof. I'd like to actively have a roof, if you don't mind.
It would be nice.
Right. So
they kicked me out of the storeroom at Walmart, so now I got to find a place.
Yeah.
Which is that's so sad. So it's the destruction of, and so. This is where Democrats get a bad rap. And it's a lot of elderly people who are largely conservative see the erosion of the American dream, and due to misinformation and lots of things, like the Fox News-ish stuff, and falsely blaming things on the national political scene, like, the Obamas and the Clintons, that their American dream has been taken away. Mm-hmm. It's largely a state issue. It's a state-by-state issue. You see it in Florida. You see it in Michigan. You see it in, oddly, places with Republican governors. in state houses. It's really weird. So but
Kansas
that's
with the supermajority.
Well, think of all those Republican governors that turned down Medicaid expansion under
Yes.
Obamacare.
Yep.
Purposely.
yep.
Yep.
I mean,
Just look at Kansas. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what the Democrats are lacking, if you ask me, is that solidarity. Is how the F did you get your voters to turn down free money for medical care and you still get reelected? How do you do that? That has got to be a magic wand.
It's not magic. It's false pretenses and it's lies.
Yeah.
And so since the Democrats largely decide not to do that,
Not to lie.
no one demonized George Bush. He was an idiot, and I don't think anyone ever thought that he was trying to destroy the country. That's just, I never thought that.
I think if they thought his cluelessness, his lack of, because he was, lived this gilded spoon life, this silver spoon life, that he was just kind of clueless to it, and the country was being destroyed, simultaneously, but he wasn't actively seeking. He was just clueless to the forces that he had unleashed
or couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Just that guy that opened Pandora's box, maybe kind of dumb.
What's in here?
And so, but then the take on Obama was he was a demon,
right?
Actively pursuing the death of the United States.
Absolutely.
And so that's the kind of messaging that's out there. That's the kind of messaging I refuse to do. As much shit as John McCain took, I never thought he was a horrible human being. I agreed with nothing. He had some very, very archaic beliefs on race and LGBT and other things. But the fact still remained that he was imprisoned for his country. There's a large swath. He did an incredible amount of public service, and he did do some really good things. But I never demonized the guy. And I think that's the kind of misinformation that we're fighting.
Right. Well, it's funny
that's
about
why there's no overall message, because it's easy to lie.
Yeah, it's funny about McCain because since he's passed, and I was talking with somebody, and I said, it's interesting when you think back to the election of 2000, because that was where McCain really first came onto my radar. I mean, I knew who he was before. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying as of somebody of substance that had ideas. Whether I agreed with him or not is different. But because obviously he ran his unsuccessful campaign for president that year, and I was talking. I said, what if everyone thinks of the 2000 election? They go, oh, what if Gore had won? And I was thinking back, and I go, what if in 2000 McCain had taken the Republican nomination, and what if McCain had won? And okay, so yes, he's a Republican, but a McCain Republican presidency as opposed to a Bush Republican presidency.
Cheney free.
Yeah, I don't know, and it's interesting, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it was just sort of an interesting thought experiment to think about that. But the thing about McCain that he got caught up in the Keating 5 scandal in the late 80s of savings and loan, and he was one of the 5 senators that had tried to pressure regulators to let Charles Keating off the hook. He got caught up in this, and he was essentially a brand new senator, and came out of it not looking good. And so all the other policies, which I agree that there's a lot of other of his policies, most of his other policies, I wouldn't have agreed with him on. But the thing I thought about John McCain that was interesting, and this is putting aside his service in Vietnam, was that out of that he became a campaign finance reform advocate, because he saw. Well, it was, most Republicans, most humans don't do that. We double down on our bullshit. We don't say, you know what? Fuck, you're right. I'm an ass. I won't do that again. And in fact, I'm going to work now to make sure I'm not an ass anymore. Most of us don't do that. We just go, no, I wasn't an ass. You're an ass. Bye. Bye. Right. And so, for nothing else, I always appreciated McCain because he did become a campaign finance advocate. McCain Feingold. I mean, that was the gold standard, at least for campaign finance things. It's gutted now and gone.
Yeah.
Citizens United. There.
I already did it.
Yeah.
In front of company, even. God.
So, but the John McCain Republican, as he passes from the scene, I mean, there's so few of them left.
There is. Well, look at the vacuum that was filled. There's some crazy town going on in Arizona right now.
Yeah.
They will have their first woman senator, though.
Either way. Yeah.
That was a big thing for McCain as well. If you guys haven't, I'm sure you haven't, but Klobuchar all the senators are getting up on the floor right now doing their little thing about John McCain. Klobuchar has great stories I'd never heard about McCain. He would take a woman, whoever it was, whoever the leading Democrat woman was, and take her on these worldwide, statesman tours, and he would go to the hot spots and make sure that he was in place there to offer up that, we are behind you, democracy is here, we're behind you 100%. But when he would come across, dictators or others that didn't want to acknowledge Klobuchar, he would stop them and say, no, this is the leading Democratic part of our envoy right now. You will stop and talk to her first before talking. He would go with Lindsey Graham all the time. Before talking with Lindsey Graham, which it had to be a party. I mean, McCain and Lindsey out in the world, I don't know.
I don't know that party.
But anyway, he did those things, and if there's only one that you're going to listen to, she went on and on for about 15 minutes telling all these great stories about McCain, and it gave you a different sense. And yes, the guy just died. You never talk ill about the dead. But one of my favorite lines...
You're Trump. Could you tell that to the president, please?
Yeah, no kidding. If you only catch one line, it's the story about he would, if a Democrat was on, Sunday TV or something and did a good job, he would call him and say, hey, you did a good job, but he'd always kick in for a communist. Just a kind of a little rib in there.
Right.
It was like, hey, I understand that probably wasn't hard on, Meet the Press with all those other jerks, and you held your own for a communist or whatever.
Well, the guy did have a sense of humor. He was a frequent guest on The Daily Show early on. Mm-hmm. And could poke fun at himself, could have fun at his own expense. The other thing I was thinking about was McCain was also one of the few Republicans to openly oppose the use of torture, which, he obviously had a personal experience with.
Imagine that.
And as we go back to, it doesn't affect Republicans till it affects them.
Yeah. So, McCain was, I think, just an interesting guy. I think the presidential run, the Palin run, ruined him. I think he sold himself to a party that didn't accept him.
And he's more or less, without saying the words, but I think he's more or less indicated that he knows that was a huge mistake and he wishes he hadn't done it.
Yeah, and besides the fact that infecting Sarah Palin on the world, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Raise the flags. I'm on Trump's side.
Isn't that exactly what Trump did, though, this time, is he embraced groups that other Republicans would normally not have embraced in order to get their votes? That was the first evidence that we saw that was going to happen, that they are two-faced liars, and I just want your vote. I don't care who you are. I will say anything or do anything and put anybody up here to get your vote.
And the people that you're capitulating to don't care either, because they're finally being heard, and we're back to that.
Yeah,
right.
And I'm sure that wasn't McCain's decision. I remember that.
I mean, he had the final say, but no, he didn't go out and. Yeah, the way there was a book written about it, and I think it was by Mark Salter, who was his campaign guy, who wrote he more or less said, "I'm sorry." But as a political thing, they looked at, here's this, dynamic Republican female governor who is a reformer, and she has a special needs child, and oh my God, it's checking off all the boxes. And no one thought to hey, have you talked to her?
Hey there, guys.
Did anyone have a conversation with her?
I shot a moose. Oh, Jesus Christ.
So
you didn't even see me coming.
But
I shot a moose from behind in my
there
helicopter.
It is. Although I tend to reject the notion that somehow that Sarah Palin's rise was that's why we're now.
No.
It's a factor in it.
No.
But Trump is the end result of 3-4 decades of Republican ideology come home to roost.
Well, I think
misinformation.
Palin is actually on the national stage the first one to spout that gibberish.
Yeah, right.
She was the first one to be, I believe this.
Right.
I don't know. Reagan had the welfare queens. That was kind of the first time I remember them digging on social issues that are so infinitesimal in our budget. I mean, as compared to the rest of our budget, I think it's 10 or 15%. So if you do the math, everybody pays about $7
Right.
for everyone to have food stamps and
Well,
Medicare and health care.
The notion of a welfare, I mean, yeah, you're right. You're the notion of a welfare queen. In other words,
Right.
I mean, let's face it. This
Basically
one,
lying.
it's a race whistle. You know, it's an African American woman who's going to the getting her welfare checks, and she's got multiple children by multiple men. This character that they've constructed, and when in fact, as we've seen time and time again, most welfare recipients are white.
In
live
red
in
states.
rural areas in red states.
And work at Walmart.
And work at Walmart.
And Amazon.
So, yeah.
He who has the gold
Wow.
makes the rules.
We're coming up on an hour here.
Yeah.
And we have not yet discussed any of the current, but any of the current stuff that our fine president has. Now, do we
Call it.
do we call it here and say that we're?
Don't you? I think we should call it. I think the media this week is.
I don't know. Will he do anything this week? What do we have to talk about?
All right, let's go around the table and not the most consequential, idiotic thing that he did this week.
I thought we weren't going to do it.
No, let's just do one. Just one, and we'll just say, we'll. This is my opinion on
It's
what's
like-
the worst.
it's like our vaping.
We don't have to talk.
You can have a vape puff.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Oh, it feels so good.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Bubble
Thank
gum.
you. Oh, my God. Okay, well, to me, the whole thing about Google.
No. Yeah,
where it's
sorry
like,
about that.
I Googled my name and a bunch of negative stuff comes up. Google's broken. There's a reason why it's all negative, asshole.
And someone's looking into it, too.
Yeah, well, of course, somebody always is. So, of course, this continues the war against the free press, the war against truth, the war against fact.
War against search engines.
I mean, and it's not singular. He got other Republicans to come into his defense and say, yeah, there's not enough conservative media out there. You're like, are you fucking kidding me? Fox and Friends is part of the president's daily briefing.
Well, they didn't come to his defense. They pushed their own narrative.
They did,
utilizing
but
that.
But you're right. They didn't come to his defense in that sense, right? But they didn't repudiate him,
right?
And they, for their own purposes, came onto that. So to me, that's just what? No, shut up, David.
My thing is the pettiness of flags at half-staff,
right?
Tweeting to the family of a dead dude with a picture of you, or not picture, but not talking about you, making it all about yourself. Not recognizing the guy's service, regardless of how you feel about him, and the absolute disregard for the duties, the social duties of this office. Asshole.
Rob?
Mine is the continuing of the smearing of our DOJ and our FBI. It just the things that I hear my Republican friends coming out at me about.
Oh, yeah.
I need to help remind them that Nixon really didn't even get caught doing anything. He had tapes, but it was like, oh yeah, you guys go do this. And the thing that he got him nothing. He got the Democratic fundraisers list or something like that. That's all he got out of that whole break-in. Here we're talking about possibly the end of democracy and and nobody wants to believe that our Department of Justice or our FBI or our intelligence agencies are worth a damn on that side anymore because we have a president continually breaking down that
Be careful
ladder.
when you say nobody.
On that side.
On that side.
On
there
that
we
side.
go.
I said
Yeah.
that. On that side,
Yeah.
I mean, you can argue until blue in the face about, hey, if this was a crime that a Democrat committed, would you want it investigated? What happened with Bill Clinton? All he did was lie about what happened in the room there. I mean, that's all that happened, and you guys went after him. Why now, at this point in the game, when all of this stuff is out, is there still this blanket of fog over them that, oh my God, it's the whole deep state is out to get Donald Trump?
What do they say?
It's basically that. It's
deep
the
state's
whole
out to-
deep state.
Right.
As like he has created this new boogeyman. I remember this back with Reagan too. Is like we were all afraid of Russians. I mean, we had bombs pointed at us.
But there was a legitimate
reason.
Yeah.
But he has that same effect on 52% or 48%.
Oh, it's lower than 52.
All right. I don't know, man. This guy is a Trumper, but he's against all the other Republicans. He sees something different in Trump than he sees in the Republican Party.
Here's my answer to that. I don't know this person you're talking about, but my guess is, my hunch is, this is a person, and although they wouldn't admit it to themselves, they are contemptuous of democracy. And Donald Trump to them is finally the strong man that they can, because democracy scares them, because democracy requires participation, democracy requires responsibility, and they are afraid of that. They want daddy to just make it right. And so they're contemptuous of democracy, and they see Donald Trump being contemptuous of democracy too, and getting away with it, and they fucking love it. They love it. They love it. Wow. So it's just there was. Look, we talked about the Q conspiracy. You know, that whole thing that was going on. So now there's another conspiracy that's making the rounds, is that John McCain did not die of brain cancer. He took his own life. He was given a choice by Donald Trump to take his own life, or he was going to be hauled away to Guantanamo Bay and imprisoned because of his involvement with the deep state. This is now making its rounds in the same group of people that believe that that are showing up at presidential rallies holding the Q, I am Q, thing, that really believe this, not just a fringe anymore. I mean, it's infecting the mainstream Republican Party. These people believe this shit.
You think it's true? Really?
And that was kind of the one of the points about.
I hadn't considered that.
I'm asking.
Oh my God! Right? You just blew my mind.
What if they're right?
Oh my God!
And that's why they all work when it's about the deep state, is because there have been things, the Tuskegee Airmen, and all of the things that have been proven to have happened in areas of the government that had no oversight. That is the biggest part right there. In areas of government that had no oversight. The whole Department of Justice is not an area of government that doesn't have oversight. The whole FBI is not an area of government.
It's about to.
So the deep state really works because everyone who thinks it's coming after them can't define it.
Yeah.
What? What is it? It's just the deep state. It's a perfect villain because it can be anything.
Yeah.
It's like the Blob.
Yeah.
It's like the Thing. John Carpenter's the Thing. Yeah, the Fog.
It's a fog. It rolls.
Yeah, what kind of fucking world do we live in where I actually agree with Jeff Sessions for half a minute, too?
Yeah.
This is fucked up.
That's not a world I want to live in.
Well, it is a world you're living right now.
Oh, my God.
Because you probably agree with the keeping the sanctity of the DOJ and not making it political, because he said that.
All right, that's it. I'm going to fake brain cancer and kill myself.
Hold on. Before we leave, I want to go back to Lindsey Graham partying. Because I'm imagining it right now, and I think that at the party, who's leaving with the most beads is him. That's a guy that can get some beads.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
All kinds of beads.
All kinds.
This song is called Baby Don't You Cry. But you know, things don't always go the way you want to. And you know, I'll do anything to keep being with you. Baby, don't you cry. Don't wanna see until you know that. Baby, don't you cry. Baby, don't you cry.
find more episodes of The No Cry Zone at thenocryzone.com. Tweet Rob, John, and Dave at No Cry Zone. And find The No Cry Zone on Facebook. Listen to every Abnormal Entertainment show on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, our YouTube channel, or anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. And don't forget to visit abnormalentertainment.com.
You've been listening to the Abnormal Entertainment Network.